What went wrong for the Connecticut Sun in Game 2 against the Chicago Sky? As we turn the page to September, Connecticut Sun beat reporter at The Next, Jacqueline LeBlanc, joins us to discuss the Game 2s of the WNBA Semifinals. Locked On Women's Basketball starts now.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. On today's show, we're going to discuss the Connecticut Sun's Game 2 loss to the Chicago Sky, how the current Sun team compares to teams of the past, and the second semifinal game of the night, where the Las Vegas Aces even their series against the Seattle Storm. Good morning and happy Thursday. Joining me today is our Connecticut Sun beat reporter, Jacqueline LeBlanc. Starting off, what did you see from Connecticut yesterday?
So yesterday, the Sun had a huge opportunity to take Game 2 after, kind of surprisingly taking that Game 1. Curt Miller's kind of theme for the whole series, I guess, is playing messy and making it messy. That's what they really attributed their Game 1 win to, just playing really hard physical defense and really disrupting what Chicago does so well in their free-flowing offense. And that did not exactly come to fruition yesterday. So I didn't think the Sun necessarily played bad defense in the first half. They definitely played really hard and gritty. You could see them hedging. Chicago just made some really good shots. They made some really difficult shots. And that's honestly what everyone expected them to do during the pregame. That's all James Wade talked about, was that they're going to make shots, and that's all they need to know. During the post game of after Game 1, the Chicago players, Azare and Quigley and even James Wade, also said, it was an uncharacteristic shooting night for them. They're going to make their shots. That definitely happened. The Sun didn't necessarily hold up their end of the bargain, and they didn't really have a great offensive game last night, especially in that first quarter, which has been such a big focus for them. And the key to that first game was really coming out hot and kind of forcing Chicago to play their game. So there really was not a lot of offensive balance. We saw Jonquel Jones get involved real early, which was great for the team. Definitely something they needed after, being limited in that first game. But no one else on the team really contributed. Natisha Heidemann was the only other player to end up in double digits. Like I said, they let Chicago get into their flow real early, let Chicago get settled and comfortable real early. Again, I don't think the Sun necessarily played bad defense in the first quarter, but coming out into that third quarter, even though the Sun were making more shots, kind of looked like they might have gotten into a rhythm, they were letting Chicago make a lot of easy backdoor cuts, and they really had exploited them on defense in that third quarter. Just something I wanted to point out is, in my article, I wrote a lot about how the Sun coming out in the first quarter is really important. But looking back at all of their, regular season losses against the Sky and, all those really close games, the Sun have always responded in that third quarter. In every single game, the Sun outscored the Sky in quarter 3, and that just didn't happen tonight. And then I guess my last point is that the Sun, even though they won the rebounding game, they didn't really convert enough of their offensive rebounds for the amount of shots that they missed last night. They missed, I think Curt Miller said that they missed like 38 shots last night. And from those 38 missed shots, they were only able to grab 7 offensive rebounds, which isn't great for a team of this caliber, of this rebounding caliber. That only converted to about a 21% offensive rebounding percentage, which is really low for the Sun. It's definitely the lowest out of all their meetings against the Sky this year. And just most importantly, I think they only got 6 second chance points off those 7 offensive rebounds. So when Courtney Williams and Dewana Bonner are not making anything, when the offense isn't really going, they really rely on those second chance points. And that's something that Chicago was really able to stifle them with last night. So, yeah.
Your story that went out yesterday before the game was titled, Did the Connecticut Sun finally figure out the formula to beating Chicago? And I think we got our answer yesterday. How do you think the Sun recover as the series goes to Connecticut? You talked about a lot of points that didn't go the way they wanted them to last night. What needs to change as they go to play 2 games in Connecticut?
Mhm. The Suns still really want to commit to playing messy basketball. I think, they're really committed to just disrupting Chicago, and that's how they're going to be able to win this series is disrupting Chicago and forcing Chicago to be uncomfortable and kind of play how they want to play. But the Suns offense needs to pick up. The Sun are best when everyone is balanced, even though, they have multiple offensive threats. They have the reigning MVP in Jonquel Jones. This offense is the best when multiple people are scoring in double digits, when people are sharing the ball, when the ball is moving very quickly and easily. And at times, especially in that first quarter, they felt really stagnant and they felt like they kind of didn't know where to go with the ball. So they definitely need more offensive contribution. Bree Jones last night missed a lot of uncharacteristic open layups. Alyssa Thomas missed a few open layups. DeWanna Bonner, after scoring 15 in game one, although, that wasn't necessarily the most efficient 15 points. She was 0 for whatever from the field tonight. She only had 2 points, and they were both from free throws. And then on that, the Sun only hit 50% of their free throws. I think they were 8 of 16 to end the game. That is definitely not good for them. It's okay. I think they average around like 70, 80, and it's okay to miss a few, but especially, coming up in crunch time when they actually were able to kind of lessen that gap in the fourth quarter when the bench was out there, those extra free throws definitely would have kind of seemed to make a difference there. So they definitely just need a more offensive balance, more offensive contribution, whether that's from DeWanna Bonner and Bree Jones, but especially the backcourt. That's kind of been a focus throughout this series. Courtney Williams has not had a good offensive game all playoffs. So, either she's due for a game or she needs to kind of step up and kind of make better shots. I think the shot selection sometime was rushed and poor. But that is definitely going to be the biggest thing is, can they disrupt Chicago with their defense and not let Chicago get into rhythm? And, who else on this team other than Jonquel Jones is going to step up on the offensive end?
Yeah, and to your point about free throws, I believe they started 1 for 7 on the night. So finishing 8 of 16 was actually a significant improvement, especially I think most of those came in the fourth quarter. With all of those things that went wrong, missed layups, missed free throws, what was the vibe that you got from the players and head coach Curt Miller post-game?
Yeah, so Jonquel Jones and Natalie Heavren, who were the 2 leading scorers for the Sun last night, they came out in post game, and it was kind of the same every time the Sun, lose a game, lose a close game, whatever it is. They take a lot of responsibility for that on their own and their own actions. A lot of it being self-inflicted. They didn't necessarily talk about things being self-inflicted last night, but you could tell that was kind of the vibe. Like they knew they had a big opportunity to. They stole game 1. If they could possibly steal game 2, that would have been huge coming back to Connecticut with 2 games left here. So I think they knew like they had a real missed opportunity, and it was kind of just not making good shots. Natisha said it in that first quarter. She didn't think they came out with the same energy they have been in the past, and again they felt really stagnant. And Jonquel Jones talked about how great Candace Parker is and how hard it is to guard her, but the focus shouldn't just be on making Candace uncomfortable. It should be on making everyone on the floor uncomfortable and disrupted. And, as far as Curt, he said, for his opening statement, he said he told the team after they lost that, whoever's going to win this series is whoever's going to impose their will on the other team, impose their will strong enough to make the other team play their own game. And Chicago did that last night. And, they could definitely feel the frustration of the missing shots, especially in that first quarter where they only shot about 31% from the field. I think Curt kind of alluded to it, how it felt very kind of disappointing and deflating to to make or to miss shots, especially some open shots, some easy looks that they had in the first quarter that usually would have gone down. And then the next possession on the other end, Chicago goes down and makes a really difficult shot, or they make a really difficult three. You know, Candace had that and one from three. It just seemed like everything was going right for Chicago. And, you know, Connecticut was missing open shots, missing missed opportunities. I think that was a little deflating to them as well from Curt's perspective.
Coming up next, we'll talk about how this Sun team differs, or maybe not, from seasons past. But first, betonline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs, and yes, even your women's basketball betting needs. I personally am but I love that betonline.net offers these options for the WNBA, and it's a very big deal. The Chicago Sky open up as 1-point favorites for Sunday's Game 3 against the Connecticut Sun in Connecticut, and the Las Vegas Aces open up favorites for Game 3 against the Seattle Storm in Seattle. These were all up the morning after last night's game, which ended just after midnight on the East Coast. And you can also bet on both series with just a couple of clicks. From the WNBA to Major League Baseball, the NFL, the NBA, and .net has got you covered for odds, lines, and games. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. So, taking a step back, this was a question posed to me by Jackie Powell, who covers the New York Liberty over at The Next. What have you seen as the difference, the 2019 Jonquel Jones and Alyssa Thomas playing together and the two playing together now in 2022?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest difference is, in 2019, during the playoffs, Alyssa Thomas was averaging about 37 minutes a game. JJ was averaging about 32. You know, they were the front court. You know, we didn't have a dominant Bree Jones that we have today. DeWanna Bonner wasn't in the mix. So it was in 2019, it was an easy decision to keep AT and JJ out on the floor whenever you needed them, pretty much at all times. That's how they kind of were super dominant. They have a good chemistry and flow there. Not to say that they don't this year, but I think, kind of just the team construction was different. You had Shakina Strickland back then, who kind of gave you more of a consistent floor spacer. You have a DeWanna Bonner now, but, sometimes she can be a little bit inconsistent. Shakina was a lot bigger, or not a lot bigger, but, she was really consistent from the three, and that's how you kind of could rely on her to space the floor. Alyssa Thomas, sometimes with this big lineup now, she's playing the three. She can space out to the floor, but, she's not necessarily a threat from deep. So that kind of, personnel-wise, I think that makes a big difference. Courtney Williams, of course, she was on both these teams in 2019 and this year. In 2019, she was much more of an offensive threat in the playoffs, and a huge part of their playoff run, where she's been relatively very quiet this year. So, I think spacing was a little bit better in 2019. The offense was kind of clicking at the right time. Not to say that it's not now, but, I think you could see some of their inconsistencies with, just balancing the lineup. Curt, throughout the season, has tried a jumbo lineup, is kind of what we've called it, of Bonner, Thomas, Bree Jones, and Jonquel Jones. And he's come to that a few times during this series specifically. But of course, it's not as free-flowing or like Chicago's offense. So I think personnel is probably the biggest thing, and then kind of balancing the lineup of when you have four really, a big difference maker on the court, and they all kind of play the same position, and they're all kind of, congested in the post. How can you kind of move the offense around and make sure they get all involved instead of kind of only one or two people being involved?
Yeah, I agree. That was kind of my short answer to Jackie when she posed the question to me. I definitely think that the personnel is a lot different. When I covered the team back in 2019, the bench was a lot less deep. You really didn't, as you alluded to, with the minutes played, you didn't take out Jonquel Jones and Alyssa Thomas, especially in the playoffs. for longer than a few minutes, maybe even like 30 seconds at a time. And Shakina Strickland definitely brings a different spacing than DeWanna Bonner. You touched on this a little bit, but at times, the front court to me has seemed disjointed at times. Do you agree? And do you think that the Sun can put together these pieces during the series to keep everyone involved, but also get that offense moving?
Yeah, so I agree with that overall. It's always difficult to kind of balance, when you have six people worthy of starting, or at least, four people worthy of starting for three positions. How do you kind of balance that? I've asked Curt about it throughout the season, and he's kind of talked about, especially toward the end of the season, about how kind of making those decisions, can kind of provide a lot of anxiety. Like you get to put Bree Jones in, but then you have to take Jonquel Jones out, and they've played really, really well together. And then Alyssa Thomas does so much from, defending, but also, on the offense. She's so versatile. So it's so hard to take her out. And, because the offense has been so balanced, no one has really kind of dominated throughout the season, or dominated in games, which is not necessarily what they want. Like, JJ dominated last night, but no one else contributed. So, it's kind of hard to strike a balance between getting a balanced offense and getting everyone involved, but also kind of distributing those minutes and trying to decide who needs to be on the floor and when. As far as how the Sun can kind of get over that, I've been thinking about it a lot, and I'm not sure I have a specific answer for that. But a lot of it is, defense and their veteran experience, and they're playing a very experienced Chicago Sky team. Someone said last night that the team averaged like 11 years of veteran experience, which definitely sounds correct with Candace and Quigley and Vandersloot on this team. But, I think it's also the front court disjointment, and kind of how that has kind of showed up on the offensive end can also kind of be contributed to the backcourt. Spacing at times, DB DeWanna Bonner is a big part of that spacing equation. When she's not hitting her shots, that's a big problem. When Courtney Williams is not hitting her shots, that's a big problem. So, I think the post can get going, and oftentimes that's a big part of the game. Like game one, when it was that defensive kind of slugfest, that was all pretty much post points. They didn't get anything around the perimeter other than like 3-3-pointers, I think. So while there are issues between kind of like balancing that front court alignment, I think, also the backcourt and the guards kind of play into that as well, with needing a little bit more efficiency, which Curt has definitely talked about throughout the playoffs.
Yeah. Can you expand on that a little bit with getting the front court or the backcourt more involved, especially yesterday when, as you mentioned before, Jonquel Jones and Natisha Heineman were the only two players in double figures for the Sun.
Yeah, so I think, Courtney has been the biggest kind of point there, because, she probably should be. They brought her back to score for these reasons. They felt a little flat from the backcourt productivity in terms of offense last series against Chicago in 2021, and that's kind of why they brought Courtney back. Like what she did in 2019, and being able to make those tough shots, being able to be so quick and move so quickly, and really get a quick basket when they need it. Like they've desperately needed that. And, Natisha has shown flashes of being able to get quick shots. Odyssey Sims and Dejanay Carrington off the bench have been pretty impressive in the last couple games as well, as kind of providing a quick spark, not only on offense, but especially on the defensive end. So they're kind of forming into their own two-way players who have been really important to this backcourt as well. But Courtney needs to start making shots. That's what she was brought in here to do. She has a really unique game, and, she doesn't necessarily need to force so many 3-pointers. They have a really good 3-point shooter in Natisha who's able to do that. DeWanna, Jonquel are both able to hit 3-pointers. They don't necessarily need Courtney to go out there and force threes, because that's not her strong suit. They need her to kind of be like play in rhythm, and she's a rhythm shooter, and I think at times throughout the playoffs, she's kind of hesitated a little bit. You could kind of see her hold onto the ball a little bit. And I don't know if it's, kind of a confidence thing of waiting to kind of get shaken out of this kind of shooting slump, but you could kind of see her hesitate with the ball, kind of take a couple second lapses when usually, it's step, and then she pulls up. And that's what she's so good at. And especially having a mid-court shooter or mid-range shooter, that's something Curt really, really values in Courtney. So she can still contribute in other ways. She's great at rebounding. She, can contribute on assists and whatnot. But they really need her to step up, especially if they're going to beat Chicago. Natisha and Courtney and Odyssey in the backcourt. They did a really good job of defending Chicago's dangerous backcourt in game one. But, Courtney Vandersloot and Allie Quigley are some of the smartest and most experienced backcourt players in the league. It's going to be hard to lock them down multiple times in a row. Chicago hardly loses 2 games in a row. So they're really going to need someone to step up, and not to put that all on Courtney. Dejanay's been big from the bench. Odyssey's been big from the bench. Natisha has had some really good flashes at times and might have struggled with some consistency. So everyone's really need to come out and kind of be on their best for these next couple of games.
Yeah, and coming up next, we touch base on the other semifinal game where Las Vegas topped the Seattle Storm in Game 2. So I know you were busy last night watching the Connecticut game and then in post-game. How much of the other semifinal matchup were you able to watch?
So I honestly wasn't able to watch too much of it. I missed the entire first half, and then I think I tuned in mostly for the fourth quarter, but it was also past midnight and the post game was super long. So I kind of, was kind of waking up and falling asleep within it, but I definitely saw the end.
Yeah, and I'm sure you saw the historic night from A'ja Wilson. Per across the timeline, A'ja Wilson was the 5th player last night in WNBA history, or WNBA postseason history, with 30 plus points, 12 plus rebounds, and 3 plus blocks. And only she and Lisa Leslie were able to do so while shooting 65% or better from the field. That was obviously you saw in game 1, but she only scored 8 points in game 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually, so Sunday I was,
I'm not sure if we lost Jacqueline. But in addition to A'ja Wilson's historic night, Brianna Stewart also had another 30-plus point game, and it was the only WNBA game of any type, regular season or postseason, with 2 players each recording 30-plus points, 7-plus rebounds, and 3 blocks. So I'm not sure how much of that you were able to catch, but it was definitely a battle between the 2 top MVP candidates.
Yeah, sorry, Natalie. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was definitely able to catch some of it, not a lot of it. I was going to say I was on a plane pretty much all of Sunday in the airport. So I got to watch game 1 at an airport bar, which was very cool because got to attract a lot of people who were kind of walking by. And it was cool to see people who were walking by and then kind of stop and take in the game. So, yeah, as far as game 2, I think just every time I watch these teams, I'm just so attracted to what Chelsea Gray does and how dominant she is, along with A'ja and Stewie. I feel like it's not just a battle of A'ja versus Stewie, but it's crazy how the Aces also have someone like Chelsea Gray, who just seems unstoppable. I think during the broadcast last night, they said something about at one point she was 14 for 19 from 3, all of playoffs this year, which was just seems like a crazy stat. And then A'ja Wilson also hitting threes. I saw that.
Yes. Yeah, A'ja was 1 for 2 from 3. Chelsea Gray was 3 of 5. Gray had 19 points, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, and a steal and a block. You know, watching her, our Isabel Rodriguez has joked that when Megan Gustafson kind of unleashed Chelsea Gray back in I believe it was the first game in the first round of Vegas versus the Phoenix Mercury, because what Chelsea Gray has been doing in the playoffs, the efficiency is just incredible. She was 8 of 13 last night in almost 38 minutes. And she's been doing that all playoffs long. And then another point that came up from Isabel Rodriguez was the differences in calm in Sue Bird and Brianna Stewart. They weren't able to pull out the game, but Brianna Stewart is what Isabel described as just calm and doing things because she can, especially at the end of games. You saw her hit a couple of threes, in addition to missing some threes in the second half. And Isabel described Sue Bird as kind of a scary calm. And you again saw that in the fourth quarter, kind of Sue Bird doing what Sue Bird does at the end of playoff games, as she has in years past.
Yeah, absolutely. They both of them are just like so locked in, but I think you're right about like Stewie just having that like presence also, that kind of like when the ball's in her hand, you can also kind of feel the calmness from everyone else on her team.
And we have at least 2 games from each of these semifinal matchups left to go. They both head to the lower seeded, so Connecticut and Chicago will be back in Connecticut Sunday and Tuesday, and then the Aces and Storm will be back in Seattle for Sunday and Tuesday as well. But before we go, Jacqueline, where can the people find your work and your social media?
Yeah, well, of course, my work's on thenexthoops.com along with everyone else on The Next who's been so great, especially this postseason with playoff coverage. And then, yeah, as far as social, you can find me on Twitter at JackDLeb. It's JackDLeb. I'll be on site Sunday for the game in Uncasville at Mohegan Sun Arena. It'll definitely be a huge game. I think it'll be very interesting just to see who comes out kind of taking the first punch. Connecticut I know they said they feel good with having 2 games in Mohegan Sun Arena, having to take those 2 opportunities there. But like I said, Chicago doesn't lose 2 games in a row. So I feel like this Sunday game, one of the Connecticut series is probably feels a little bit heavier. I hope there's probably more of an urgency to win Sunday and instead of letting Chicago take it. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm sure we'll have something else that'll come out of this series. It's been such a good series to start with anyway. So yeah.
I am excited to see what you write out of the 2 games in Connecticut. So thank you again for joining me, and thank you to our viewers and listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, go check out the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022. It's an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. Not only will you hear from the local team experts on the Locked On Podcast Network, as well as a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets. You'll be able to search for the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to check out the rest of the Locked On family of podcasts as well. Thank you again, Jacqueline, and until next time.